Hey, I don't know if any of you have heard or read the book Good to Great. There's a book called Good to Great where Jim Collins talks about one of the most important things in running an effective business, getting businesses that are great and extraordinary. One of the key things he talks about in there, he refers to getting the right people on the bus. So I'm playing off of this metaphor here this morning, getting the right people in the truck or in the truck. So, but his points are well made that no matter one of the most critical things to a successful, effective organization is having the right people. And not only having the right people, but having them in the right places and on the bus or within the organization. And so we're going to talk today about some ideas and techniques to make sure that we're hiring the right people. Now, I'll emphasize in some of my examples and things hiring truckers, but I know we hire other types of positions and things there at Brady Trucking as well. And so, we'll expand on looking for any position at the company. One of the things that I thought would be a good starting point for us is let's talk a little bit about some of the mistakes and the things that aren't going so well, so that we can fix and address those things. Let me just open this up to everyone. I know this is hard over a webinar situation, because we all try and talk at the same time. But let me ask, what do you think? What comes to your mind as some challenges or mistakes that might be being made in the hiring process that might make it to where maybe we're not getting the right people? Anything come to mind?
In a hurry. In a hurry, hiring the first one to come through the door.
Yeah, and that was the first thing I put on here too. Rushing the process. So that might be happening because we didn't plan well, knowing that things were coming. Sometimes stuff happens. I mean, let's face it. We all of a sudden we lose a couple of drivers or we lose some people, and we're in a stress. Projects are due, deliveries have to be made, and we got to get somebody fast. And it's hard when we get in that rush mode. We're almost better off to find ways to deal with that and not rush the process. I know this is easy to say, but it's hard to do when you're in the fire. But if you get in that rush mode, often we're making those mistakes. We'll hire the first couple of people that come in the door and say, "Can you fog this mirror?" Okay, you're hired, and so getting out of that rush mode. What else? Other things come to mind?
Maybe just not checking backgrounds well enough.
Okay. Yeah, not really. Maybe not verifying references, checking their backgrounds. Again, that might be either part of that rush mode, or maybe we haven't made that part of our process to do some of that. Rasa, let me ask you regarding background checks and reference checks. Is that something that is common that is done there at Brady, or what is the process there? Would the supervisors or leaders be responsible for that? Is that something you help with, or?
Well, no, the supervisors, if they're doing it, I mean, if it's happening, they're doing it. They're not getting back to me with it to do it. But the main background checks that we have, of course, is on our drivers that we get through their follow-up on their DOT stuff and stuff like that. But actual background checks, we're not doing them the way we should be.
Hey, Ken, I have a question, because I know that most companies' policy is you don't tell anybody, you don't recommend anybody. Basically, all you say is, yes, they were employed from this time to this time, and that's all they say. But is there a way, do you have a sneaky way to try to get more information out of previous employers?
Yeah, there's a couple of techniques that work. One is having the employees or the applicants have them sign something, and we have this actually on our job application, but you can have them sign something that says that they authorize prior employers to release information and not hold them responsible. So sometimes when you give someone that, you say, hey, listen, I have a signed document from this person that used to work for you that can I fax that over? They're releasing you to allow you to talk to me, and then could we have a discussion? So sometimes when they get that, they're going, oh, okay, I guess I've been released. I see their signature. I'm comfortable talking to you now. Another technique that I use is, you know, first I don't start out with the hard question. Say, you know, I call up and say, hey, you know, so-and-so has applied for a job. They mentioned they used to work with you, and I'm calling just to verify a little information. You know, and I'm polite and kind, and I say, you know, can you just tell me their dates of employment? And can you tell me their, you know, did they work for you, and what was their title? And you know, and then you just kind of say, would you rehire them? You know, or what can you tell me about, you know, their work that you liked about them? You know, and they may start into, well, we only give dates of employment and such and such, and then I might say, you know, I understand we do the same thing here, but do you mind just telling me, would you rehire them? You know, or what challenges did you have with them? You know, so sometimes just you know, you have to be careful. You don't want to be annoying, but being a little bit persistent, often you can get some good information.
Okay.
So a few other challenges that we run into that I see out here. No real clear hiring criteria. So we might just be kind of winging it. We haven't really thought through. We haven't read the job description. We haven't thought through, what do I really need the qualifications for this person to come in and have? What skills and abilities? What experience? You know, what do I need to really have for this person? And if there's others involved in the hiring process, you know, making sure they're clear on the hiring criteria as well. Little preparation is another common challenge, and that might be part of that rush mode, you know, and so we're just kind of like, just bring them in. And they come in, and so in that part we haven't really read the job application or their resume. We haven't thought about other questions we see on there, gaps in employment, wanting to really understand their prior experience, not preparing set interview questions. You know, so again, maybe not preparing ahead of time for the interview is another common mistake. Not asking the same initial question from each person. You know, so if you don't have set questions and you're not asking the same question, it's going to that potentially is a problem. I want to clarify something here. It's okay to ask additional probing questions, but you want to have kind of the same set questions that you're asking. And once you get some good defined questions for each of the positions, it should be pretty easy to work through. By the way, Rasa, this might be another project you may want to have Debbie and I help with. Is maybe we take some of the common jobs that you're hiring for, and we could come up with some suggested questions. Or you know, I think we have the hiring criteria already in place on the job descriptions, and we've prepared job descriptions for most of the positions there at Brady. So if you haven't read those or know about them, ask Rasa, because we've already started a lot of that hiring criteria and the job descriptions. We could maybe take as a project to help get you some suggested questions too.
Yeah, that would be good.
Another challenge is the kinds of questions that we're asking. You know, so a lot of folks are asking what I'll call situational questions, and a situational question might be something like, how would you handle this? You know, so if you were faced with this kind of situation, how would you handle this? And it seems like it's maybe a good question. It's just all we're really testing is their knowledge on something, and maybe that's you know, there are times when we need some knowledge questions in there, but if all we're asking is situational or knowledge questions, the risk is that they're basically going to tell us what we want to hear. I mean, it's very common. Most interview situations, you know, they come in there, they want the job, they're going to say, well, what do they want to hear? And it may not really be the real way that they handled things in the past and such. So you'll see when we get to talking about some of our interview questions, we want to ask questions that get them to reflect on how they handle real stuff in the past, because that's going to be your best indicator of how things would be handled in the future. Hiring too many friends and family is another common mistake. You know, we just sometimes we just, you know, we got a good referral from someone or a family or friend, and we're just thinking, oh, well, they're, you know, they must be good because they came from so and so. Or if we get too many family and friends, we create conflicts of interest that hinder our decisions and hinder, you know, affect the way we work with them and manage them, because we've got this conflict. I can't confront them with feedback because I got to eat dinner with them in 2 weeks at the Christmas table. So be careful of too much of that. I know that, we have some family and friends at Brady, and that's going to happen. To the extent possible, try not to have them reporting directly to other family members, is a good strategy. And maybe not rely too much on that all the time. Look for other ways to find people. All right, some other common mistakes, asking non-job-related questions. Or questions that are protected by law, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. So you've got to make sure we keep questions focused on job-related things only. Not getting other opinions. So sometimes we're the only hiring manager. We meet with them one time and we make the hire. So again, that being rushed to hire or making sure getting other opinions or views, having someone else meet with them is a good idea. Only interviewing once and then hiring them. I've had times where I may interview somebody 2 or 3 or 4 times at the most, but maybe multiple interviews and maybe involving other people in other situations. Depending on the level of the position, if we're just, I've even had times where I get them in, I've gone out to lunch with them. I wouldn't suggest you have to do that with every person you're hiring, but some higher level positions, sometimes I get to where I can see them in a different situation. Only hiring based on the interview. So make sure, we'll talk about some other techniques and tools and ways to, we don't hire just off of the interview only. There's other things to take into consideration there. We already talked about not checking references or backgrounds. Those are some of the common things. Any other mistakes come to mind that, those are a couple of the ones I thought of this morning here, but any other common mistakes? Well, let's dive into the hiring process and just kind of talk about this, and we'll go into a few ideas here. We've always tried to keep our meetings to about 30 minutes, and so I'll hold to that. We were a little bit late starting, so we'll probably go about 5 after to 10 after. So if we go through looking at the whole hiring process, one of the first things that we're doing is we're looking to bring in a pool of candidates. So one technique to help us get the right people is recruiting and then advertising in the right places so that we're pulling in the right folks. There's a lot of free places that we're often advertising in, and I know we won't go into a lot of detail right now in terms of and Rasa, the process here again, I don't know if you or Frank, do some of the initial placements or recruitings, or if that happens at the supervisor level as well?
No, it pretty much, right now we have a person assigned. Becky is our new executive secretary to check, and she's doing most of the ad placing and that. If it's, for drivers, if it's our, like our office people, each location, and we have ads, but each location places them.
Okay.
And we may.
So if it's the first time you're placing an ad somewhere, you might check with Rasa, and because she may already have a good template ad in the way to write that. And Rasa, if you never need any help, check with Debbie or I too. So, but there's lots of places, to free places, even where you can place the ads. Really good place to find people is networking. So asking, networking, whether it's with other coworkers, employees, networking outside, getting the word around that you're hiring is another good way to recruit. And you have a process now. Do they fill out an application or submitting in a resume?
Yeah, we do it only online through 10th Street.
Okay, great. So make sure that we're reviewing that information, and then looking for gaps in employment, anything that we have questions about, their prior experience or training or skills and such, asking them questions on some of that stuff is helpful. But reviewing that ahead of time, I often will, that'll be one of the first places. And when I'm looking through all the resumes and applications, I'll kind of categorize them. I like 3 piles. You do what works for you, but there's always, for me, there's that pile that says, there's no way they don't meet the criteria at all. What were they thinking? I don't want to talk to that person. Throw them in that minus pile. I've got the maybe pile that says, I'll come back to this one if I don't find others that look good enough, and then I want to do a telephone interview file, and they look good enough that I ought to be talking to them. Often, a good technique is to do a telephone interview ahead of time. It's useful. You can get a lot of basic information right over the phone, and going through and talking with them. I like asking such things as, why are you looking? Because if I know why they're looking or why they're making a change, it helps me to understand why might there be a good fit here at Brady Trucking. So asking them questions like that, I want to understand, why do you feel like you're a good fit for this? Why are you applying to be a trucker? And why do you feel like you're a good fit with our company? So I can ask them a few questions right over the phone and kind of help get a good feel that might save me, an hour of time in an in-person interview. And also I get a little different picture sometimes from somebody talking to them a little bit over the phone versus in person. I wouldn't make a hiring decision off a phone interview, but I will make a decision about whether I'm going to bring them in for an interview from there. And then the actual interviewing process as well. And we'll go through, I'm going to go into some examples and details on that in just a second here. But just to kind of finish painting out the picture here, we might do some kind of selection tests, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Maybe more additional interviews, reference checks, background checks, and then the final selection process and the job offer. It's kind of, if we just look at the whole big picture of the hiring process here, we'll focus most of our discussion today on the interviewing, maybe give you some ideas of some other testing, and then how to, some of the final selection things. So one of the things that is critical is starting off with a hiring criteria. And I mentioned that, I believe we have job descriptions for every position out there that does contain a lot of the hiring criteria. The first thing I would mention is the non-negotiables. So there's certain things that's there for each job that we need to make sure that we've defined. So if we're missing any of that in the job descriptions, let Ross know, and we can get that tied into there. But so, for example, I threw out a couple of ideas for a driver. Non-negotiables. They likely need a good driving record. They probably need to work weekends and overtime requirements. They need to be drug-free, have their CDL. So there's certain things that they have to have. I'll try and cover those pretty early on with anyone I'm talking to. That might even be something I cover over the phone interview, so that, because I don't want to bring somebody in to discover they've got this bad driving record, or to discover, so I let them know, we're a drug-free organization. We'll be testing you. You got to have your CDL. You got to have this and this. Paint that picture for them so that they know the job expectations. If there's some hard parts of the job, I let them know those hard parts. Are you willing to do that? When have you done that kind of thing before? Make sure that they're very clear right up front with that. Another thing that's important is making sure that you understand what do they need to know? What skills and abilities? These become part of that hiring criteria. And again, some of that should be contained on those job descriptions. So for example, and let me ask you, what's an important skill or ability for a driver? What jumps out to you that a driver needs to have?
Well, for us, it's driving, the driving conditions we drive on, dirt roads, steep inclines, that kind of stuff. Where a flatland driver, that's all he's done.
Mm-hmm.
Have to have some training.
So if I were asking a question related to that, I may say, tell me about some of the terrain that you've driven on, or have you ever driven in difficult off-road type situations? Tell me about it. So you can get them talking about that kind of thing. But it seems like too that they even kind of need that ability to. There's some mechanical things that they need to do with the truck, even in situations where they've got to put chains on. They may have to do some maintenance kinds of things, so you might look for some of those kinds of skills and abilities too. We really want to focus in on those key things that really differentiate between candidates. So, so look for and find those kind of, what is it really that really makes a difference? And does something jump out to you? Is there something about, if you think about your top drivers, What is it about them that really makes them stay with you a long time, that makes them most effective? Is there something that jumps out? Sometimes it's even just it can even be a personality or an attitude. The really hardworking kind of individual that they're flexible, they're willing to, they can follow orders. They're very dependable. You know that when you say you got to be here at this time and the job's got to be there and there, they make it happen. Is there anything that jumps out to you that's really distinguishing?
Usually moody and ornery. Them are the ones that last the longest.
There we go. Find somebody that's ornery.
Pretty much it.
They might last a long time, but they're sure fun to work with, aren't they?
They are, yeah.
So we may look for a certain experience level. I don't know that, most of the jobs, I don't know that you require a lot of, education requirements. Some of the positions there might, but most positions probably look more for certain skills, abilities, maybe some prior experience. But, again, understanding that, helps you understand your criteria. The last thing I'd mention here on criteria is that, you're looking for a certain fit. Do they fit with the pay? Do they fit with the type of work that they're going to be able to do, that they're going to do? If you had somebody that's only worked behind a desk, they've never been out in the field, they've never gotten their hands dirty, putting on chains on a truck, are they really going to do well as a driver? Probably not. So make sure that they understand the conditions and situations they're going to be in, and make sure they're the right fit for that. And I throw out the pay. I've had times where I've hired someone that they're desperate for a job, and they were used to making $10,000 more a year than what this job pays or whatever, and they're willing to take the job, but they're not really a good fit. They're used to higher living requirements, and I bring them in, and they might stay there for a little while until they find something else, or they're in there pushing me, wanting a raise, real early on. So I try not to hire too far off of what they're used to paying, but make sure they're fit for your team, your culture. Is that someone you can manage? There's lots of those fit issues to take into account too. I mentioned the telephone interview. These are some of the kinds of things that I like to ask on a pre-qualifying it. Why change? What are you looking for that's not in your current job? I ask them about pay. And by the way, it's not hard to get pay information from people. I just say, do you mind telling me what you're currently earning or that you expect to earn in a new position? And you notice the way I worded that, do you mind telling me? Because they have to say, yeah, I mind telling you. So but occasionally they'll say, well, what are you paying? And I may say, well, give me a pay range. What's a range that's acceptable to you? And I can get that kind of information. I look for gaps in employment, why they feel like they're fit for this job. So those are some good pre-qualifying example questions that you might ask. So preparing for the interview, there's a couple of things here. Make sure you're clear on the criteria. So look at the job description. Make sure you've written out, hey, this is what I really want in this position, this person. Develop your set interview questions. So, and we'll talk about interview questions in a minute, and some good, those I just mentioned are a couple of good starting points if you haven't asked them ahead of time over the phone. Review their resume or their job application. So look for, where's the gaps in employment, look for things you may have additional questions on in the resume and the job application. And then find some place that you can eliminate the disruptions, and then you're pretty much ready for the interview. The interview questions, I mentioned that, the best indicator of future success is going to be the way they've done things in the past. That's a pretty good indicator. So if I can get the candidate to reveal past results of how they've really done real things, that makes me better able to select the person. So this is what they call behavioral interviewing. So I ask a question that gets them to talk about how they've handled something in the past. It should be focused on my hiring criteria. I say KSA's, knowledge, skills, and abilities, or the requirements of the job. The questions should be open-ended, so I don't ask a closed-ended question. I may say, describe a time where, or describe a time where you had to drive in a difficult terrain, or tell me about your past driving experience. So I can ask, kind of open-ended questions. It should be pretty related to the job. Should draw from past actual experience. These kinds of questions. I'll give you an example. In fact, I've already said this one. So an example of a truck driver. You mentioned the importance of having experience driving in your terrain. Off-road and high, steep mountains, difficult weather conditions. That might be one of the criteria. And so maybe I say describe a time where you had to drive in tough terrain. Sorry, I didn't word that one correctly here, but describe a time where you had to drive in tough terrain. Or tell me about your driving experience. Might be some examples. Now you also want to, once you've asked your question, so you have this list of set questions, and we could pull together a few other examples of questions here. But so like if a probing question, you can once you ask your set question, you'll ask additional follow-up questions. So they may say, well, I've driven in off-road terrain when I did this and this. Then you can say, well, tell me a little bit more about it. Describe more about this terrain, because you want to really dig deep so that you can see all the possible areas, that around that hiring criteria. So it's kind of like you're the detective, really trying to zero in. So if I were a dispatcher, for example, if I'm hiring a dispatcher, I may have other probing questions where I might have asked them, describe a time where you've done scheduling or assigned work for others. And then maybe I'm asking them more follow-up details, like how did you do the scheduling? What challenges did you encounter? How did you resolve those? How did you track their effectiveness? So there might be other probing, more detailed questions you might ask even after you ask your initial question. Here's an example of if you're hiring a supervisor or manager. My hiring criteria might be that I'm looking for someone that can manage performance of others, so the ability to resolve performance challenges with employees. So I might ask a question like, describe a time where you were faced with a challenging employee problem. And so once I get them talking about that, then I may come in and probe with other questions like, well, what did you do? How did he respond? How did you determine the problem? What was the end result? I don't ask all of those questions all at once, and their answer might have sufficiently addressed all of those things, and I move on to my next question. But if they didn't, that's where I probe in to get a deeper understanding of where I am with somebody. All right, so there's some things that you can do with your in-person interview that can help you as well. I'd recommend building a little bit of rapport, help the person relax a little bit, bring them in. Be careful. You don't want to get into too much personal stuff with that rapport discussion thing. Avoid the topics of getting into family and that kind of thing. Beware of snap judgments or stereotyping first impressions. Sometimes we're real quick. Somebody comes in and we're real quick to form opinion. Try and keep an open mind when you're going into these things. I mentioned before it's important to explain the job honestly somewhere, whether you've done that in your ad or whether you've done that in your phone discussion or in person. Make sure they're real clear about all the requirements, because you don't want to be hiding something just to try and talk somebody into a job. They need to know, here's what it is, or here's what it is not. Ask the same questions from everyone. Behavioral interview questions are preferred. A behavioral interview is, like I said, asking it in a way that gets them to talk about how they've handled things in the past. So it's like, tell me about a time where, or describe a situation where you've done this. So asking those kinds are preferred. You may have a few of the other kinds too, but if you have too much of that, you're going to have people there just telling you what they think you want to hear. Make sure that you're really listening. So have good and quiet time is okay. Sometimes there's a tendency when we're doing an interview, we may ask a question, and then we're afraid to, they're just about to say something real important, and we start talking again, or we ask the next question, or we bail them out. It's okay to ask hard questions and to give them a few minutes to think about it. Through the process, I would take notes. It's difficult if you're interviewing 6 or 8 people in a day, and remembering the differences between candidates. Just make sure the notes you're taking are short, descriptive about the situation, and only write down job-related stuff. Don't write down distinguishing things about their looks or that kind of thing, that might be construed as discriminating and such, So I allow them to ask a few questions as well, and then maybe talk about next steps, from there in an interview. All right, so those are a couple of key interview things. We're running a little bit close on our time here this morning, so I'm going to end with a few of the things not to do, and let me just throw that out. What jumps out to your mind right now that some questions you should never ask?
Family status. What else?
Religion.
Yeah, religion, age, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, excellent. You're right on. So questions about children, plans to have children, babysitting arrangements, religion, age, physical or mental health. What was that?
Political.
Political. There's not really a law against that protecting the political, but it's certainly an area that might cause you to hire based on a bias that you might miss a real good individual just because they have a differing political view than yours. So it does, it wouldn't make sense to ask that, but you wouldn't get yourself in legal trouble per se. But anything about now this may seem interesting, are asking about their arrest record. We can ask about. There's certain ways that we can ask that kind of information. I believe on your job application, we can ask if they've had any past felonies, have been convicted of a felony, but we can't ask, other things. I don't know if I'd even get into personal habits, sexual preference. All of those things are kind of becoming some taboos and don't really necessarily help you to focus in on hiring the right person. So the key is just keeping it job-related. I mentioned, too, taking short descriptive notes during the interview process. Make sure what you write. In terms of final selections here, and I'll end with this, make sure you consider other types of selection techniques, like using multiple interviewers, getting other opinions. I have what's called job simulation selection, maybe putting them in some situation where you can assess them on the job. I don't know if you take them out and have them drive or watch so there may be some test. I've had times where I've hired someone like for an accountant, for example, and I may have them actually create some sort of spreadsheet or do some number calculations, or I may hire a receptionist or a customer service person, and I may put them in a situation where I'm asking, having them deal with an angry customer. So there's ways that we can create some sort of selection techniques. I've hired assemblers before where I had them actually build something. So we may think about that if there's some other types of selections. There may be some written tests that we could consider. So I don't think we have anything right now in place there. Doing reference checks helps, background checks, drug testing, all of that. One technique that's useful is looking at you define your hiring criteria. Maybe you're looking for interpersonal skills, customer service, fit with team, technical knowledge, relevant experience. I just threw these in as examples. So you have your criteria down here, and then you have your top candidates along the top, and then you could go through and rank them. Rank them or assign them a score, and then maybe the weight for that. So this is just kind of another technique to help select the best person. Ultimately, it does come down to how you feel about someone, too. I caution of hiring just off of gut feel, but after you've gone through the process of analyzing and interviewing and looking at all the criteria, often the gut does kind of tell you, and it may be telling you because you viewed some other nonverbal communications and things about the candidate. So ultimately it comes back to what you feel right about and you feel good about the person. But keep it all job related. What questions do you have for me or other things that we want to talk about today? You're dealing with our hiring the right people.
Doesn't look like there's any here.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. And if you have any questions about wanting job descriptions or good interview questions, coordinate that all through RASA. And RASA, if we can help you with any of that, you know how to reach Deborah I as well.
Okay, well, thank you, Ken. Appreciate it.
Hey, thank you. Happy holidays to everyone.
You too. Thanks.
Thank you.